Well, I mean, there's a network. There's an open audio. We have the software. I wanted some normal audio. I just didn't know if you wanted.
Oh my goodness. Is the AC always this strong in Georgia? Is it an Atlanta thing or like a Georgia or the South thing? Okay, 'cause I'm cold. Yeah, this is like my sweater. I haven't worn this in 5 years. So what's going on? Thanks for coming to my spotlight. I really appreciate it. They really put me in a barn, didn't they? Thank you. So, what should we talk about today?
Sean tripping on the stairs.
I won it. I've already tweeted Brandon Sanderson. I was like, I won the Jordan Con Magic Draft Tournament, Brandon. Let's go.
Good morning, Jordan Con. Good Saturday morning. How you guys doing today? Did y'all have a good Friday? Awesome. My name's, if you don't know me, I'm Sean Hillman. I run the science fiction track here at Jordan Con. And when Jimmy told me there was going to be a science fiction author, I was like, oh, yeah. So let me introduce the award-winning actor, author, martial artist, author, actor, martial artist, Wesley Chu.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me. Thank you, Jordan Con.
So yeah, let's talk about the Magic draft, so we can really get Brandon pimped about this. So how was the game yesterday?
I mean, it was good. It was long. I forgot how it's been like over 20 years since I actually played Magic, like sitting down in a room and played Magic with people. And it was like 4 hours long. It was 4 hours long, and there's so many new rules now. Like, does anybody else play Magic here, or do you not know what the heck I'm talking about? Okay, but like Magic back when I played back in the 90s was like, attack, first strike, flying, and that was all there was, And now there's like 40 new mechanics.
Yep.
And I'm kind of old, and the room was dark, so it was very dark. So I was like half the game, half the time I'm trying to like read the text, but I did okay.
Was there any memorable moment from the game that that stood out to you?
I just remember everybody saying how like the time Brandon Sanderson was guest of honor, he was there and he like held court and like took on all challengers. So that was the thing. So I was like, I'm gonna beat these people and then I'm gonna challenge Brandon to it because I'm gonna see him next month. I'm flying out to Salt Lake City to record some videos with him. So I really want to kick his ass. Okay. I did. I tweeted that. I tweeted, with a gift. Is it GIF or a GIF? How do we say it in the South?
I say gift, but
a moving image of the Rock, going like this, and I'm like, let's go, B. Sanderson. So we'll see what happens. He's gonna crush me because I hear he has literally every single card in existence.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So for the authors out there, was one of your books harder to write than any of the others? Was one stand out as being tougher to write?
I mean, my standing rule for writing, and I've written 12 books now, is that every book I'm working on is the hardest book I've ever worked on. And that's been mostly true, even though, the reality is the last book I just handed in is the hardest book I've ever done. And it's not even close. So The Art of Prophecy is my new series from Del Rey. And I sold it off of a partial in 2019. End of 2019, and we all know what happened in 2020. I did finish the book in about a year, and it was 180,000 words when it was completed. So around the end of 2020, I started working on the sequel, The Art of Destiny, and that book took me almost 3 years to write. I'm sorry, I'm not great at math these days. I've had 2 kids since then. Yeah, so between 2020 and now I had like an extra kid and a pandemic, and now I have 2 kids under 7. So my brain is like shot. I spend a good amount of time every night sitting in my garage staring at the wall. It's kind of like my thing now. So, and then this book, I spend one of the rules about writing is, when you're doing your first draft, just keep going. It's gonna suck. Your first chapter, almost inevitably, you will rewrite because when you first wrote that first chapter versus when you finish the book, the story is going to be completely different from what you thought it was going to be. So just keep writing, because if you start self-editing early on, you're going to self-edit forever. Well, I self-edited for a year, and I self-edited like the first 20,000 words for a year, and that's not smart. So I did finish and when I did hand in the book in October of last year, my editor came back with these huge notes saying, "What is happening with this half of the book? We really don't need it." So I rewrote the whole book, and but by that time I finally got it. Like when it clicks, it clicks, So it finally clicked in like December, and then I went on like a Brandon Sanderson-ish tear and wrote like 80,000 words in like a month and a half. So the book is good. The book is fixed. What? You know what? I have kids. I have young kids. I don't sleep, period. So it's kind of, what is sleep? But I mean, it's, I spend a lot of time like my time to rest is between 12 a.m. and 2 when I watch TV. So, but then the book is done, and that was my hardest book. It was literally just 8 months of me like rewriting the first opening 3 chapters of this book. That was not fun.
Kind of sticking with that thing a little bit, I know a lot of writers, we've had trouble had some trouble during the COVID with the lockdown and things like that. Do you think that affected your writing during that time? Did it change? But some people have written darker things due to that, and change themes a little bit. Do you feel like that affected you at all?
Yeah, it didn't affect my writing, but it affects your writing process. I mean, the thing about writing is, as a writer, it's okay. When I had my day job, I used to work in in technology. I'd go to work, I'd work out, then I'd finish work, and then like when I go home, I leave work at work. There's no additional weight that I carry home with me unless I'm on call. That's whatever. But when you're a writer, and especially if you're a full-time novelist, you carry that work weight with you all the time. I'm cooking food, I'm thinking about plotting. I'm walking the dog, I'm thinking about why this story sucks. And then when I'm playing with my kids, it's an existential crisis about is this book ever going to get finished? So there's a lot of weight you carry. And one thing that happened with the pandemic is, and I'm sure almost everybody had that, is we carried additional weight. Mental weight about, okay, is going out grocery shopping safe? Can I hang out? I haven't seen my friends in 8 months. If my kids are going to daycare, are they going to be okay? So we all carried this additional weight. And the thing about, people is we are resilient people. So for the first 6-8 months, we were like, yeah, we're gonna Zoom and hang out on Zoom and be, and have like Zoom drinking parties and everything. And for the most part, I felt like society was able to sustain that. But after a while, that weight, it's just, that's that's why the real like exhaustion set in around 2021 when I was working on Art of Destiny. and that's when I kind of cracked. So, but definitely it didn't affect what I wrote, but it definitely affected how I wrote and like the amount of energy it took to start writing. And probably the reason why I self-edited so much in 2021 was because of that.
So, do we have any questions from our audience? Anyone have a question for Wesley?
I have a question. You said that you had reworked a lot of these parts of your books. Was there anything that kind of
I'm sorry, was
was
it?
there anything that's been missing in it?
You know what? The thing about writing is that the thing about when you plot way ahead of time is there are things that you conceive of early on that you just kind of latch onto, and then I'm like, okay, this is so cool. I'm gonna write this whole plot line, and I really want to like be clever about this. And then I wrote, and part of this was it wasn't working for a while, for much of the plot, but I pushed through it because I really wanted it in there. And then when my editor read it, she's like, "This is like a side quest for your main character. What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Shit, she's right." And then I realized that I got so attached to that idea early on that I couldn't see. I was blind to the fact that it was a stupid side quest. It was a silly kind of like, and whatever endeavor. And then the moment I let that go, saying, "Okay, I need to do something different. I need to have these stakes really matter to this character." That's when it all kind of clicked together, and that's when I go, "Hey Trisha, who's my editor?" I'm like, "You're absolutely right. I'm just gonna gut the whole damn thing, throw it away, and this is what I'm gonna do with it." And then she's like, "That's amazing. Why didn't you do that a year ago?" And I'm like, "I don't know." That's why you're here. In fact, I should have talked to you ahead of time before I wrote 100, 200,000 words. And so, yeah, so there are things that, you have to let go. And for the most part, I mean, as a writer, I'm 10 years into this career since I actually debuted 10 years ago in a week. So April 30th was my debut. But as a writer, it's a strange thing where in most professions, I was an internet architect a few years in my previous career. Is as I get more experience in my career, the job gets easier. I know how the architecture, I know how to design things better. As an attorney, you know how to write contracts better and all these things. But when it comes to writing, it never actually gets easier. It never feels easier. And even though I'm a much better writer. The Art of Prophecy objectively is much better than The Lives of Tao, even though The Lives of Tao is my best known book. But as you get more experience in writing, it never gets easier. You never feel like you're a better writer. But what you do get is, when it doesn't work. I'll go through a scene. I'm like, this scene doesn't feel wrong. It's that instinct of writing that you kind of build up, and that actually helps a lot because you don't feel better, but when it sucks, and then you have that feeling more of that. Okay, this needs something needs to be fixed here.
When did you first run into the Wheel of Time series?
When did I first start reading Wheel of Time? I want to say I was in high school. So I was in high school when I first started reading Wheel of Time. I think, what book is it? Path of Daggers. That's book 7? Book 6? Path of Daggers?
Path of Daggers?
Book 7. Oh, book 8. Okay.
There we go.
So I was in, I don't remember when I started, but it was in high school. I remember because when I think Path of Daggers came out, or maybe the one before it, I was supposed to go on a date, and then I learned, and then because when you're in college, sometimes you don't really get caught up with everything. Then I learned that the book was coming out, So instead of going to the movies like I was supposed to with my date, I went to go to Barnes and Nobles and I picked it up, and then she never saw me again. And then I actually, when I met my wife, we met and we actually clicked because we both had like matching hardbacks of the Wheel of Time. So that was it started a long time ago. I mean, it's it's early on.
What was about the series that kept you interested, or what it was about it, both as a reader and a writer, did you find interesting about it?
I think the Wheel of Time was the first like real epic fantasy I ever read. Like before, I moved to the U.S. back in like '82. You know, I didn't, my father's an English professor, which you think helps as a writer. It doesn't help. I have another story for that. But so like when I first came to the States, my father was like, he wanted me to learn English because we lived in Nebraska at the time, and so he took me to like the university bookstore, and he took me to like the Shakespeare section. He wanted to read like Beowulf or some shit, easy reading. But that's who he was, and so I actually ran to like the section of the bookstore that had all the the dragons and the magical swords. And the first two books I picked up was A Spell for Chameleon by Piers Anthony and The Misenchanted Sword by Lawrence Walt Evans. And that's kind of how I learned to read, is reading fantasy. So I was a big fantasy reader like most of my childhood, but The Wheel of Time was like, the Eye of the World was the first like, this is something different. This is like serious, long, deep, complicated fantasy that wasn't just like the Lawrence Walt Evans Ishtar books were just fun, kind of linear but very self-encapsulated books. But The Wheel of Time was sprawling. So for me, it was like a strange new thing, and it kind of opened me up to like what fantasy could be. And so, and it kind of, it's probably one of the main reasons why I am here today. I mean, not just at the con, but also as a writer.
Do you think, especially with your current series you're working on, do you think you'd ever get to 14, 15 books of 1,000 pages each, or not quite that ambitious?
I'm not gonna lie. When I first told my editor, I was like, "No, Art of Prophecy could be 5 books. It could be 5 books. I think that's how long it would take to really tell the story appropriately." And she was like, "You need a lot of wind under your wings to kind of carry that book." And that's the thing is, I don't think there are very few IPs these days that can carry a 14-book series at the Wheel of Time. I mean, is there any series right now that can remotely even touch it in terms of like its size and fan base? I don't think so. Game of Thrones, yeah, but Game of Thrones is not going to go to 10 books. It's not going to go to 8 books, I don't think. Right. Well, I'm giving George some runway here. But like, so it's, and I mean, yes, Game of Thrones could carry 14 books if it really got that big, but I mean, story-wise, it shouldn't be that big.
Right.
And from a support standpoint, very few series can actually go that far. I mean, what Robert Jordan made is probably one of a kind.
I remember an interview with Jordan long time ago, because I'm also old.
Here.
Where, and this was like
Which part of your back hurts?
Yeah. Where I remember around book 6 or 7, he was saying, the interviewer asked him how long it's going to be, and he said, "Well, I know where it's going to end." So that's the question I have for you. The current series, do you know how it's going to end already, or that's not how you work?
I absolutely know how it's going to end. At the very, very, very end, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. I'm a little because it's how I'm going to get there right now. I have one book to do it. I have about 250,000 words to finish this book, and part of me is like, I might need to cut some stuff out because that's, on one hand, 250,000 words is a big book. On the other hand, I'm like, there's so many ways. I mean, I have 4 point of views, and I want them to end in a way that gives them all proper endings and kind of but ties everything together. And thing is, the last book of it's common knowledge that the second book of any series is really hard to do because it's kind of like the middle stepchild book, But the reality is the third book, the last book, is the hardest by far because you are closing everybody's story and you want to leave them all in a good place or in a bad place, wherever they belong. And you need to do it in a right way that kind of feels natural. And that is a really tough thing to do. But yes, I do know where it's going to end, whether it's going to be a winding path. I'm kind of a hybrid. Does everybody know what a plotter pantser thing is? Well, I mean, I've developed like a hybrid way to doing it. Is I used the Lives of Tao. I pantsed. I just pantsed the whole thing because I didn't know what I was doing. But then after that, I started plotting. But I'm a big fan of free will. So these days, when I write books, I will write out like a 8,000-9,000 word outline, and then I start working on it. And then at some point, inevitably, a character will want to jump the tank. He'll want to go left instead of right. He'll want to make this decision instead of that decision, and it goes against my outline. And I used to just like get really angry about that because you either let them make the organic, natural decision, or you follow your outline. And then at some point, I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to let them do what they want to do. And I started doing that. And what happens is I would start re-outlining from that point on. So by the time I finished the book, I would be on outline version 9.6 or something. I'm just constantly re-outlining because I want the characters to make live, organic decisions. And sometimes those decisions are going to be dumb. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with dumb decisions because I make dumb decisions every day. So, why can't my characters make dumb decisions?
Absolutely. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Anybody?
So when does the second book come out? And as a reader, I've massacred the names of the four main characters. So could you pronounce their names?
The Art of Destiny is scheduled for release on September 26th. The characters are named Taishi, Jin, Sali, and Kasami. And I don't actually put too much weight in characters' names. I know some people, a lot of writers will spend weeks on one name. But this is the perfect name for my character. A lot of times I'm like, his name is Ted for now, and I'll change it later. And I'm like, gosh, his name is Ted now. I mean, with those characters, I honestly didn't spend too much time on them.
Yeah, you name a character Bob. It's like, oh, I got to spell it differently. B-H-O-B. Bob. Yeah, there we go.
So there is a thing I do offer tuckerization sometimes for charity, and somebody wants their name or their girlfriend's name or their wife's name in the story, and I'm always happy to oblige. We've done some for the book I wrote with Cassandra Clare, and raised a lot of money just to tuckerize a name. But for Art of Prophecy, I've done that for charity as well. But the thing is, if your name is Stanley, we need to modify it in a way that it works for that world. So, it takes some research, but then we've done it. We're I tuckerized a guy named Harold. His name is Harlan, actually. His name is Harlan, and so I worked with him on how to make a culturally proper sounding name with his that is meaningful to who he is, and so we've done that.
Any other questions?
I mean, we're here for an hour. You can ask me anything. I will answer any question right now. It's a little bitter. Is this Starbucks? Is this Starbucks?
No.
Okay.
We just found somebody random.
You found a random dude. Do you have coffee? Can I have it? was it like that?
I read it was for the guest of honor and they came. So it would have happened that way.
I knew it. I mean, Starbucks coffee is really bitter. I mean, okay, I'll be honest. I don't have much of a palate. Maybe it's because I like a lot of spicy foods, but I think when I turned 42 a few years back, more than a few years back, but I realized that, and I was like, I stopped giving a shit about things. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stop pretending that I like wine. because I spent 20 something years being like, oh, I'll take the Chardonnay, let me see your list of white wines. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have zero, it all tastes like wine to me. It all tastes like sweet, what, yucky stuff to me. So around 42, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stop pretending to like things I don't like. So I was like, I don't like wine. I actually don't like alcohol, and I don't like erasure. I kind of like Nickelback more than I admit. And, so it's like, so I just started being honest about what I liked and what I didn't like, and I'm okay with that. I'm too old to pretend to like to like Maroon 5.
That's fair.
That's fair, right?
Yeah. What was your decision on making so many of the perspectives in the Art of Prophecy female perspectives? There's only one male perspective.
That is true. Part of it is I wanted to do something different. I feel like fantasy still is very have like adult fantasies very male focused. Why there's a lot more female protagonists, but adults still kind of has some work to do. Part of it is is like the older female master and the younger male student is not a common trope. It's not commonly done. You always see the wise old man, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. And also I love writing old people. It's just so much fun. There's so many layers to them, and they could be so free to say and be things that a younger protagonist wouldn't understand, wouldn't know. And I do read a good amount of YA, and I'm a little tired of the young people saving the world. It's always like the 16-year-olds and the dumb adults, So I was like, I wanted to kind of like approach things from a different angle. And then the Art of Prophecy is all about kind of like upending some of these tropes, So if you notice in the series, the cover for the first book is Taishi. The cover for the second book, which is beautiful, by the way, if you haven't seen it, is Kasami, and the third book is going to be Sali. So it kind of falls along the arc of the tone of the series. Is yes, it's about prophecy. Yes, it's about this chosen one, but it really isn't. It's about everybody around them, and these are three very powerful, strong women who like their quests to kind of do what they have to do that surrounds the prophecy. But at the end of the day, it's not about the prophecy. It's not about Jin.
There we go.
Ooh, yeah.
So I'm curious about the side quest that you cut from the book. Are you going to repurpose that and use it?
No. It's there are like as a writer, you're going to end up kind of like tossing away many good scenes, really great scenes that at one point you wanted to put in a book, but it ended up just never happening. For this particular, the only thing I actually ever repurpose is like sex scenes, because sometimes there's a good sex scene that just doesn't belong there. Like if has anybody read? I had a Walking Dead book called The Walking Dead Typhoon. That's kind of The Walking Dead based in China, and I wrote that book. Robert Kirkman from Skybound asked me to write it. He was like, "Give me a Walking Dead book set in Asia." That was all they get. That was my only direction, was do that, set in Asia. I'm like, all right. And I had just co-written 2 books with Cassandra Clare in her Shadowhunters universe about Magnus Bane. So like I write really good sex scenes now, And so like if you're not familiar with Shadowhunters, it's a huge series, and there's a character named Magnus Bane who's a half Asian, half Dutch, 400-year-old warlock, and he's dating like a 19-year-old angel. So it's at that time I was kind of a prude when it came to like sex scenes, because I just it's something that I wasn't very comfortable with. I wasn't familiar with. So Diana Gabaldon actually took me under her wing, and she's like, "Let me send you my not yet printed how to write romance book," and then she goes, "You should look up yaoi.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that was. Okay. And can I talk about stuff like this here?
Sure,
All
absolutely.
right,
can.
okay. So yaoi is Japanese anime gay sex scenes for straight women. It's very specific because there's actually gay sex scenes for, for gay men or I read her book and I started doing research. My wife walked in and she's like, "What are you doing?" and I was like, at first I was like, and then I was like, I don't know what's happening with my career, But I mean, it was such a great experience. I learned so much. Because, let's be honest, a good sex scene is actually very similar to a good fight scene. And fight scenes are my jam. I love fight scenes. And I became pretty good at writing sex scenes. And going back to The Walking Dead, is in Walking Dead Typhoon, I wrote a 6-page sex scene because I'm like, we are in the middle of the apocalypse. What the hell else are we gonna do? There's no streaming. We can't go play soccer outside. What are we gonna do here? And then my editor was like, "This is a really good sex scene, but this is The Walking Dead." And I'm like, "So you got to cut it." I'm like, Then I'm like, so I pushed back really hard, and it became a 1.5-page sex scene. And a part of me was like, "You don't know how to have sex," but I actually don't even remember the question anymore. But that was, yeah. So yes, so I did reuse that material because we had to cut, some sex scenes from the Magnus Main book, and then I just kind of repurposed some of the movements and beats and everything, and I put it into the Walking Dead book.
So let's continue with this theme because it's fun. How important is showing physical intimacy in a written story? Is it? I mean, obviously it's story dependent in a lot of ways, but could you talk a little bit more about that? Sex scenes or physical intimacy in writing.
Okay, so back to the idea that a good sex scene is a good fight scene. Okay, and it's absolutely true because it's not about the action for the most part. In the early draft of the Lives of Tao, I had extensive, beautifully choreographed fight scenes. I mean, I come from a martial arts background. I've done some stunt work, so I was very proud of the fact that I could reenact every single one of these sex scenes. I mean, I'm so sorry, not sex scenes, fight scenes. I'm in so much trouble now, But like, so I can reenact all these fight scenes, and so like my wife was an early reader for it, and she'd be like, your fight scenes like 4 pages long. At this point, you're just mentally masturbating, and I'm like, she's kind of right because I was showing the movement without like, so a good, sex scene or fight scene has to have certain layers, and to be honest, the actual movement and the actual physical aspect of it is the least important part of it. It's about the emotional rush in the feel of what happens, the impact of the scene. It's about how it carries the plot forward. There's so many aspects. I mean, in many ways, people think fight scenes are easy because it's just physical movement, but in many ways, it's one of the hardest things to write because it has to do so much labor. It has to do the job of like 4 different things. So, and a fight scene, the actual physical intimacy, the actual physical part of it is the least important. I mean, if you read any like Lee Child stuff, early on in my career, when I was working with my agent, and he was like, you should read some of these books, and one of that kind of like help balance out how fight scenes should work. And one of the books one of the authors he recommended was Lee Child's. And if you read like, some of the early Jack Reacher books, I remember I read like the very first book, and it was like, there's a big fight scene with a bunch of dudes here, and and then he's fighting a bunch of dudes, and the only actual physical action that happens is he headbutts somebody. Everything else was before and after, no other action. But the tension was high, it carried the plot, it had impact, and it showed, lasting effects, and it was character building for Jack Reacher. So that's what you want to do when you write these kind of scenes is you want to build everything out and have that simple action carry it forward.
Those questions?
Oh, and read? So I actually was not a sci-fi reader. I kind of fell back into it because writing fantasy is hard. like the very first book I tried to write was called are we recording this? Because whatever. It was a low fantasy called Woes, Toads, and Crossroads. It was a 180,000 word book, and it was terrible. It was so bad. But it was also the most important book I've ever wrote because I learned, I made every mistake from it, and it taught me how to write. I mean, at the time I was so dumb, I didn't look up the internet. I was like, I don't know how to write a book. I'm just gonna write it. I don't know what submission guidelines are. I don't know how long books should be. I'm just gonna write. And in a way, it was very freeing to do that because it all came out of me. And then I had to learn to edit. Then I had to learn to like write characters and plot and whatever, everything else. But so that was my first attempt. And after it went nowhere. After I trunked it, I got drunk for a week. And then I decided that, I'm going to write the Liza Tao. So I wrote the book that eventually became the Liza Tao next. But I didn't read the first, other than like Interstellar Pig or whatever, like you read in like grade school, the first real science fiction book I read was actually John Scalzi's Old Man's War. And that came out in 2006. So I definitely was not a consumer of science fiction up until, I read Ender's Game. So I guess that's science fiction. But that's more because it was such a big book as opposed to like me actively looking for science fiction books. So
I was going to mention Old Man's War earlier when you talked about old people saving the universe. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's definitely fits into that idea.
Yeah, but Old Man's War, John puts them into like these, vibrant Superman green bodies. They were all Captain America.
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
So yeah, they might have an old mind, but like, I think like right when they got their new bodies, the first thing they all did is they all had orgies.
Yes, right. I remember that.
Yeah. So not quite the same. Sorry, this spotlight would really kind of. I'm sorry, guys. I'm glad there's no kids here. I'm not like that normally.
But subsequently to that, has there been a science fiction book that you've read in the meantime that stands out to you?
I read Holton Mac. I think Pierce Brown series. I don't have to even say that. It's a great series. I've read most of John's books since then. I read several Campbell books. On the top of my head, I actually haven't read that much the past probably 4 or 5 years, except for some blurbing books. Mike Mamay's got a good series out right now. The thing about being a writer is if you're a big reader, the best way to stop reading is to become a writer. Okay, the problem with that is not because I don't love to read. It's just that it uses the same part of the brain, and also we work at home, so we don't commute, So it uses the same part of the brain. So after a day of writing, the last thing I kind of want to do is read, and that kind of sucks. It's kind of sad, to be honest, but it's hard, man. It's hard to kind of read for pleasure when writing is like your job.
Because I know for me, I get self-critical. I'll read something real good. I'm like, oh, the last 2,000 words I read are crap.
Well, it's also like when, like right now, I can't watch anything without critiquing it, like the latest not the latest, but the last week's Mandalorian episode. All I was doing was like, I don't buy that. That is not an organic decision, or like, it's like this. Anyways, yeah, it is a lot of critique. It's somehow that part of your brain sometimes you don't turn off anymore. I'm editing a lot now. Everybody else.
Any other questions or other questions?
Do you find that the kind of things that you're excited to read also align with the sorts of things that you're excited or inspired to write?
No, well, part of it's because I'm trying to read more broadly now, but part of it is right now, like for the Art of Prophecy is a book, that type of book, a wuxia book, a martial arts book, was something I wanted to write since I was a little kid. The story for that is when I moved to the U.S. back in the 80s, early 80s, I lived in Nebraska, so Nebraska back in the 80s, there was like literally like 5 Asians in the state, and like 4 were in my family. So the only way I got to kind of like learn about my culture, my home country, whatever, was like through these movies every Sunday called Samurai Sunday. So so in a way, that's how I learned about my people can fly. We can punch through walls and everything. And so I mean, that's kind of how I fell in love with martial arts. And when I was old enough, I wanted, that's when I started training. But there weren't any books back then, about martial arts or kung fu. There was like, Jim Cotto. There was a martial arts book, but I think it was like karate/gymnastics all put together. But and even back in 2012, 2013, when I debuted, there was Asian epic fantasy was not a thing back then, And at that time, I actually wrote my main character in Eliza Tao. Rowan's hand is Asian, but I was worried about the market. Like, could a market even have an Asian main character, Asian male main character? So, I even though he was Asian, I kind of shied. I didn't put any emphasis on that. And then the idea for the Art of Prophecy came around in like 2014, 2015. The initial idea for it came. But at the time, I was a science fiction author. I was still a new author. Changing genres is not usually recommended that early in your career. I didn't think Asian epic fantasy was a thing. And I was proven right by the market at that time period. And also the story was just so big and sprawling, I didn't feel I was ready for it. I mean, it took, 10 books. I finally hit list in, 2019, 2018. And after I did all that, finally when I was like, okay, I am now ready to sit down and write this book. And so I mean, this was the book that I wanted to write since I was a kid, or at least this type of book. And this is the story that I wanted to tell ever since I debuted. So it took a while. It took a while for me to actually like finally sit down. It took 8 years to finally sit down and go, okay, let's get to work on this thing.
Good questions. Anyone? Bueller? How does being a writer affect your family? Like, are your kids aware that you're a writer and what that means? Because my child doesn't respect that at all.
Oh yeah, there's no respect. I mean, my oldest thinks I'm rich because like I go at a book event and I was in the very front, but he doesn't know. I'm home a lot, and if anything, they affect me more than anything else because for 10 years I had the house to myself, and then pandemic happened, and then 2 kids happened, and suddenly everybody's up in my grill all day. But you know what? It's being a writer kicks ass. It really does because it's there's very few professions where you can be like this is my passion and I'm actually doing it for a living, and that's awesome. But in also many other ways, when your passion becomes your career, it becomes a job. And in all aspects, no matter how much you love what you do, a job sometimes suck. And then especially in this age, I mean, being a novelist is a difficult industry to survive in. I debuted in 2013, and I remember I did the math back in 2018, 5 years into my career, and I was like, you know what? 95% of my debut year are no longer writing. I sincerely believe that anybody has a book in them that they can publish. It's just a matter of grit and will of getting that work in to write that book. I sincerely believe that most people can at least fulfill like a 3-book deal if they're traditionally published. But 3 books is roughly the amount of time it takes. It takes about 5 years to write 3 books for the most part. And there's a reason why, 95% of my debut class after 5 years are no longer working. It is a hard industry to be. It is hard to be a career writer.
So any questions?
Anything?
Wesley, which was harder for you, being a stuntman or being a writer?
Being a writer. Yeah, stunt work is easy. Well, it depends on what kind of stunt works. Stunt works, it's like Skittles. There are many different flavors, So like the stuff that I do is martial arts stunt work. I mean, I'm a terrible driver, so I would never do like car chase scenes. That'd be terrible. I'm afraid of heights. I could barely swim. So like I've done some stunt work where like, okay, we're gonna throw you off the second story balcony. You're gonna go in the water, blah blah blah. And I'm like, is somebody gonna be in the water to save me? Because I'm a doggy paddler, So, but when it comes to like action sequences, everything is highly choreographed. You practice your beats, positioning, pacing, everything is done ahead of time, so that by the time you actually do it, it's not easy, but it's not. But writing is a whole different thing. Writing is pulling teeth every day. First drafts are like really hard for me these days because it's you are creating something from scratch. You're start creating something new, and then after you create it, you realize that it's not very good. Then you got to edit, rewrite, edit, rewrite, and then it's out in the world, and then people see it, and people email you, and then they go, "This is what you did wrong," or "This is what I don't like about it." This is and it's something that you have to kind of build that skin for. Like for all writers, I will give you 2 pieces of advice. Most readers are very forgiving if you make a mistake. If you get a street wrong or get a time wrong with dates and everything. But there are 2 things that you can never, ever, ever, ever get wrong. Okay? Guns and horses. Okay? Because if you screw up a gun or horse terminology or anything, they will come for you. They will let you know. That's it's not a clip, it's a magazine, or like this is not how you saddle a horse or whatever. And like, they are very passionate about those 2 things. So
Yeah, a friend of mine related a story where she, I don't remember the specific firearm, but it needed a safety, but this particular firearm doesn't have safeties, and it was a big thing. It's like, no, I need it. And it's like, well, it doesn't have that. So that really big back and forth.
pick another gun.
So as a martial artist and a stuntman, were you ever filming where someone didn't have the knowledge that you did, and that made you uncomfortable, or you gave them advice or didn't give them advice because it wasn't necessarily your job?
I mean, the very, very first gig I ever did, I elbowed somebody's face head open. But okay, and part of it was, it was low budget, and part of it was like, that's the thing about stunt work is, on top of the practice you're doing, you're shooting this thing like 14, 15 times, and often you're shooting late into the night, and it's just like it's all about predictability and hitting your beats. And at that particular scene, we were literally on the martini shot, which is like the last take of that thing. And, I was throwing an elbow, and instead of him going like this, which he had done 30 other times, he went like this. And there went our insurance for that film, So it happens. And then that's why you drill. You drill, like I'm not doing that stuff anymore, but the guys who do it now, they, when you're really good at stuff like this, it's almost like an organic process for them. But you have to kind of drill and practice a lot. I mean, every year I feel like I still got it, but I don't. Okay, it's like I remember like 3 weeks ago. This happened 3 weeks ago. I'm doing yoga, and I'm like, my balance is not that good anymore, and it used to be great, And it's one of those things like at 45, I think my warranty really expired, and everything just started like going like this, but no, so I won't. Like I'm still pretty flexible, and I think I can still do a backflip these days. I'm not gonna try. I mean, I could. Yeah.
No.
I like fighting. I used to enjoy getting thrown, like getting thrown, learning how to fall, like, you know, rolling out of like high, not high, but like, you know, like six foot elevations. So I like doing that, but I really like my specialty was weapons or like martial art weapons. I was known for like the rope dart, which is the inspiration for Sally's weapon in the Art of Prophecy is the rope dart is basically Mortal Kombat. Okay, Mortal Kombat, the character Scorpion uses this rope spear. Okay, funny story. My old crew back in Chicago was the Mortal Kombat crew. So Johnny Cage is this guy named Daniel Pacina. He was like one of my earlier teachers, and his specialty was the rope dart. And you know, like Kung Lao is one of my best friends, and that's where the rope dart came from for Scorpion. So that was kind of my thing. And what the rope dart is what Sally's tongue is in the Art of Prophecy is it's a rope dart that can stiffen into a spear.
You got a question?
I kind of want to quit. I mean, social media is great if you enjoy it, and it's great if you're good at it. But if you don't like it and you don't want to do it, I don't think you should. Like, I get it. Book Talk is huge right now, and it's a great way to sell books, but it takes a lot of time to actually get good at Book Talk. It takes a lot of effort. And personally, you know, a certain demographic will do very well in Book Talk or in TikTok if they want. But the rest of us, I think it's diminishing returns, you know, and I would rather you work on an amazing book than spend 3 hours a day recording TikTok videos. You know, I have a pretty sizable Twitter account. You know, I just lost my check mark, but I'm just kind of like, you know, because of, well, I mean, I don't find that much value in it. I feel like, yes, it's necessary to market your stuff and advertise and everything, but I mean, it's a little different because I'm traditionally published. So you know, contrary to popular belief, your publisher does do marketing for you. They do publicity for you. Maybe not. It's never as much as you want them to do, but they do it. So if you're down that path, and you don't want to do social media, then don't. There are many authors who don't do social media, and they do very, very well. You know, to take that time to write a better book, write more books. First draft is the worst. I mean, I used to say, like, you know, whatever I'm working on as I write is the hardest thing I'm working on, which is, you know, kind of true. But yeah, I'm firmly on the side of first drafts are the worst. And then part of it's also because as I've become a more seasoned writer, you know, editing's where you polish that turd into a diamond. You know, I should say coal. Anyways, but see, I just edited that. But yeah, so. I think as I become a better writer, become a better storyteller, you know, I'm able to critique and kind of like see where, you know, see the layers of each scene better, and I enjoy that process more. And it's also a little easier, you know, especially when you're writing a huge sprawling epic that's like a big book, 200,000 words or plus. There's a fatigue factor of drafting that sets in, you know. No matter how fast of a writer you are, it's a lot of words.
You like after you finish the first draft, so you go on for a while and still go on before you get it together?
No. I mean, I'll take a day or two off, you know, go walk in the sun, play with my kids. But for the most part, there's something to be, I mean, writing, when you're a beginning writer, no, you are working off of inspiration. You're working off of this, like, you know, you're working off a dream. You are hungry, and if you're not a hungry writer, then, you know, there are other ways to make money than writing. Okay, but as you become a professional, you are contractually obligated to be creative. You are contractually obligated to produce, and unlike most jobs, there's no PTO. Like when I don't work that day, I'm not making money. I'm not eating. So unlike, other jobs where I would take a PTO and I'd be like, whatever, the job's still there when I get back. And I'm still getting my paycheck in 2 weeks. And it's different as a writer. Now, I will say once I finished, I handed in the rewrite for the book that got approved for Art of Destiny, I think maybe 2 months ago, and I haven't been working since. So that I'm okay with. I'm okay with taking some time off in between projects to kind of recharge, get whatever exercise, do whatever you got to do with your life to kind of like get yourself back because my next book, which I'm starting when I get back from this con, is going to be like on encapsulating for the next 18 months. It's going to be a 250,000 word book, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be due in 18 months. It took me almost 3 years to write the last book, but I had to do this last book in half that time. So the recharging part is important, but as for putting a book aside, that kind of depends on how you are as a writer. For beginning writers, that's not a bad thing because usually your first book took you several years to write. It's a work of passion. You've rewritten it 3-4 times. You know it so well. And sometimes you do need that palate cleanser to kind of like take a step away from that book. I don't do that as much now as, now that I've done 12 books.
How do you like the con experiences? I mean, obviously we're great here at Jordan Con, so
I'm having a great time. I'm volunteering for panels. I'm like, put me on more panels. I'll read Slush. I volunteered to read Slush last week. Yesterday. So yeah, it's been fun. It's kind of like a nice getaway. My kids aren't waking me up at 6 a.m. That's kind of cool. But it's like, I played a Magic the Gathering tournament last night. So it's been great. And I have to say, Jordan Con is different from most cons.
yes.
And I think part of it is like, Comic Cons is its own beast. Literary cons are, the Hugos, World Fantasy. Those are cool in their own way. But the thing about Jordan Con is there's an underlying connection, not only to like fantasy, not only to like the Wheel of Time, but also to like, to fantasy. So everybody here's a reader. Everybody here loves fantasy, and it's so that the feel is very different compared to most other conventions.
Trust me, as the sci-fi director, I know everybody here loves fantasy. Yay!
I think sci-fi is great. I mean, there's so many good like sci-fi projects that you can that are out these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much good TV now. So I'm hoping to see more. I'm hoping to see more fantasy. So,
Any other questions? As we're just about to wrap things up.
Can you talk about what it's like to write the evil characters? Because there's a real actual ability in this last book that. Where did that come from?
it came from a dark place. I'm assuming there's a specific character you have in mind, and she is the most controversial character. People love her, hate her, mostly hate her, and I'm okay with that. So the character is probably Kasami, in case anybody. And thing is, I have a plan for her, and I am not a believer in like evil for evil's sake. I think that's boring, and I may have pushed it a bit too much in her introduction that way, but I have a plan for her, and I want her to start at a certain place. When we were brainstorming the cover for the second book, by the way, yes, publishers do consult the author about the covers. Okay, it's not true that they just do whatever they want. So, but when they were consulting us about that cover, they were like, well, we think it should be Jen who should be on the cover of book 2 because blah 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 blah. And I'm like, and I thought about it because a lot of people don't like Kasami, but is that going to affect book sales and everything else? But I'm like, well, I have a plan for her, and this is my vision for the covers for the series, so I'm just going to stick to it, And I feel like by the end of the series, people who hate her might hate her less, or or at least see what her path is like, and that there's a reason for what happened with her and how she was introduced, and would be pleased with how she ends up.
When you were writing it, did you question if you had taken a relationship?
No, I thought she's fun. I like her. I think she's fun. I think, it's like they're, people are so, like fantasy tends to be so serious sometimes, and part of it's like, it's like everything is so like, and especially like past decade, with like the Game of Thrones show, everything's so dark, and like, I want a little bit of crazy levity in things. So I may have pushed her to a place a lot of people don't like, but I don't really care. I mean, I want you to like the book. Please like the book, but like, oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. But it's yeah, definitely she's a controversial character, but I hope I do her justice by the end.
Wesley, so we're out of time. Thank you so much for spending.
Thank you
an
for
hour
having me.
with
Thank you
us.
guys for coming. I really appreciate.
Thanks, everybody.
There are copies of my book in the Artist Alley. I will say the Art of Prophecy is almost sold out. I think they only have like 2 copies left. So if you want a copy and you miss out on it, hit me up. I'll send you a copy. So we'll work something out. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Hello, announcements, real quick. 1 o'clock, Wesley will be back along with the art consultant Omar for signings. Yep, and Amazon will be here. Oh, wait, over there. Book signings over there. And wheel of time will be at 4. Wow, okay, we have that up there.
Yes. And I think we're in the